Now, the next question is masking and exposing brightness and darker areas. This is by Rohit. I have already shown you masking. So masking is in Lightroom, the masking and using your brushes. So when you use a brush, you are using that brush to a particular area, and using that particular area, then you use a localized slider. I'll show you briefly how to do it just in one picture. Let me go back to Lightroom. Let me go to another. Now this was originally shot like this. So now I wanted to make this temple roof brighter. So what I need to do is take adjustment brush. This is a freehand brush, and allow auto mask selected. Now remember, I'm using a very large brush, and I'm using a mouse here. So I can choose overlay. So it will tell me exactly where my brush is painting. Now, since auto mask is chosen, the mask will find the edge, and it won't allow the brush to ever go outside the edge. So that is the advantage of using auto mask. So I can go all the way here. See, it's not crossing the sky at all. Now, when it comes to these rings, what happens is the brush is too big. So I can use a square bracket key. That's a key above your enter keys. So I can go there, and I can make sure that the inner circle of your brush is the size of the ring. So that center square area, so far, if you don't go outside, you can easily brush that. Now, one of the problem with the auto mask is it finds edges everywhere. Now I have got the very clean outer edge, but there are a lot of areas inside the roof which also have various textures. So those textures will not be covered with this brush. So now what I'll do is I untick the auto mask, then paint those areas wherever those areas were missed. Now the whole area is covered. Now what you're seeing is basically covered with my brush. So now if I want to brighten this, first I have to come out of this overlay mode. So press O again, and then check your exposure. Remember, this is a localized area, not the exposure in this basic panel. That is different. This is only applies to this particular brush. And remember this pin. So the pin is clicked, so that's why it's black. So when I change the exposure, I can increase the exposure. You can see that the roof is getting brighter. Sky remains exactly as it is. So now I can have a brighter roof and brighter sky without spilling anywhere. So this is the advantage of using a brush as well as a control given by that auto mask. So learn how to use your auto mask. Auto mask is basically used only to the edge. Somebody has unmuted there. Okay, now it's fine. Vinod. Vinod,
sir,
can you mute?
This.
Yeah.
Sir, Niranjan Murthy here. Can I ask a question now?
Yeah. No, you can type in a chat. I'll answer those questions. Go to the chat in the Zoom panel and just type in the question. I'll answer right. That will be easier than talking. I'll answer you once you start typing in the chat. Let's go to next question. Is there a way to make adjustment brush a feather more than 100% slider gives. Unfortunately, in Lightroom, there is no such thing as more than 100%. 100% is the most what you can go as far as Lightroom brushes are concerned. In Photoshop, yes, you can use a Gaussian blur to mask the brush, but that's a different technique as such. This cannot be done in Lightroom. Unfortunately, Srinivas, you can't do it in Lightroom. Let me go to next question. This is a sharpening question. There are two questions here. Basically, I will explain everything about sharpening and noise reduction. This is where most people get stumped as far as Lightroom is concerned. Lightroom can do a fantastic noise reduction as well as beautiful sharpening, but you have to know your limits and how you can do it. So the questions are, one is show me all the sharpening as well as noise reduction controls and how to do optimally for both. Then what is the function of the radius tool, which I'll explain again in the sharpening. How to fix highlights? This is Vinod's question, and I already covered it. Remember, highlights in your picture. There can be highlights. The problem with the highlights is when you expose the picture in your camera, if you have gone beyond your camera sensor capability, you'll end up in getting too bright highlights, and which are called blinkies. So there is a option in every camera to give what is called a highlight alert. Highlight alert warning is the one where your picture will start blinking, telling that you have gone too much of exposure you have given. So what really happens is the sky, most of the time it's the sky which gets blown out. Some areas where it's getting blown out is normal. For example, if you have a sun in your sky, sun is obviously going to blow out. That you can't help it. There is no way you can get an unblown out sky with the sun which is sort of not blown out. The sun will be blown out. That's okay. But if a cloud is blown out or if part of the sky is blown out, that cannot be brought back even with the Lightroom. Even in a raw processing, it cannot be brought back to normal. So keep that warning in your camera on and never exceed to that particular limit. So don't underexpose, but overexpose up to a point where you don't get highlights. Now let's go back to stop a share and then come back. When I used editing a Mantap ceiling, yeah, I did only using adjustment brush, the shadow option. Let me show you how it really happens. Okay, let me go back to that particular same shot. Let me reset the picture. Okay, now let me go back to basic setting. Now this is the brush I was using, adjustment brush. Now I'm not going to use that brush. I'm going to use the auto setting. Now let's open up the exposure so that the underside of the Mantap is bright. But see what has happened to the sky. Sky is blown out. Now, if I do something to the exposure brush, what happens is, if I reduce the exposure, the sky becomes darker, the Mantap also becomes darker. If I open up the exposure, the Mantap becomes brighter, but the sky is bleached out. So, because the basic setting is a global setting, it will affect every element in the picture. When I'm using a brush, I can restrict it only to the Mantap. So that is the beauty of a brush. I hope that is clear. Now let me go back to the sharpening.
Doc, he was talking about the shadow, opening up the shadow.
Opening up the shadow. Okay, let me do the same thing in the opening up the shadow. Yeah, to a certain extent, it is possible in this picture, opening up the shadow. Let me show you how it will be. So I reset the picture. So open up the shadow. The shadow is open, and the sky is unaffected. Yes, that is one way of doing it. I agree. Shadow can be open. Yes, Niranjan. Yes.
Thank you.
I basically wanted to show you the example of a brush. And this is pretty easy to show you. Shadow opening will not work in every case. Now, let's say that I wanted to shade this particular granite with a different tint, different white balance. So that is not possible because white balance is a global setting. So then it is not possible. So in such a case, I can go for the brush and I can just make that granite to look like the granite look, slightly bluish look that I can give using the brush. Hope I'm clear.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Now, let me go back to sharpening. Let me take one of the pictures. Let me take this, this boy itself. It's a relatively sharp picture, but there are noise. So let me show you different settings of this particular picture as far as noise as well as sharpness is concerned. So there is a detail slide panel which basically has sharpening and noise reduction. Now, one of the criteria when you do sharpening or noise reduction is that you have to do it at 100% view. Either you put the picture in 100%. I can do that by closing down the preset panel. I can go for the 100% view. This is the 100% view. Or I can take this small square here and I can use it to do 100% view. So all you have to do is just click on this square button and just take it to eye. Most of the time we basically want the eye to be sharpened. So let me take it to the sharp eye and make sure that this is 100% and this is at the full view. So I get two different views. This is at 100% and this is at full view. Now this is very important because when you do sharpening, don't go for 200% or don't go for a normal view because you won't be able to judge the sharpening. The other key which you use in the sharpening very well is the Alt key. I'll explain for each of these sliders. When you use Alt key, it will give you a slightly different look. Now, let me start sharpening. There is a default sharpening which Lightroom applies to every raw file, which is about 25. Now, this is not 25%, it's a value of 25 sharpening. If it is a JPEG file, assuming that JPEG is already sharpened, the sharpening is 0. So in this case, sharpening is 0. Then, so as you start opening the sharpening, you can see that the eye starts becoming crunchier and crunchier. So this is already a JPEG file, so already sharpened. So probably around 2023 is where you stop. Now, what is the criteria what you use to judge when to stop the sharpening? Basically, when you start looking, the picture starts looking crunchier, and there is a halo around the edge. Halo is area where there is higher contrast of black and white. When you start seeing it, I'll just, because in a video it's very difficult for you to judge. So I'll crank it all the way up, so you can see around here basically what has happened. Or if I go here, you can see around his eye, you can see there is a halo developing. So that halo should not happen. So you bring it all the way down. Now remember, when you are seeing a picture, the color picture, you again have a difficulty in finding where exactly sharpening stops. So when you press Alt, Lightroom automatically changes as you change the sharpening to black and white. So you can judge exactly where that halo happens. In this case, probably around the 20, 17 to 20. That is a point where I'm going to leave the sharpening. Then comes the radius. Radius. Now, before this, let me tell you what is sharpening. It is not as though your Lightroom is able to sharpen just like your camera lens. It's not going to go there, adjust the sharpening or focus points. It is not going to do that. What it's going to do is it will find the edge, it will darken the darker edge, it will brighten the brighter edge. So it gives an illusion that the image is sharpened. So that is what sharpening is. Now, The radius is how many pixels with that particular sharpening should happen. So by default, it's 1. I don't ask you to go beyond 1.5. You can go for 1.5, but most of the time I just leave it at 1. 1 is quite good value. Radius value, don't go for smaller than 1 or bigger than 1.5. Maximum you can go is 3 in Lightroom. You can't go beyond 3, but most of the time it is just 1. So I suggest you go between 1 and 1.5. If you have a very large picture which has got multiple small pixels, I'm talking about something like Sony AR4, it's a 64 megapixel picture, so stick at 1. Whereas if you have a mobile picture which has got 12 megapixel pictures, you can go for 1.5. By default, I usually keep it at 1 and just forget about it. Now, the next happens is the detail. Now, detail slider will change where the sharpening is happening. So as you bring it closer to 0, less and less of the pixels are basically getting smaller and smaller pixels are the ones which will get sharpened. And as you take it larger, larger and larger pixels get sharpened. So if you find that after sharpening, you have lost the details, bring the slider down or up. Basically, you play around with this, and somewhere around 40 to 70 is where I find a sweet spot where I'll stop. But it differs from picture to picture. So it's basically your eyeball, what you're going to do. And there is no hard and fast rule where the details should be. One of the idea is when you make sharpening really sharp, it should not look like it is sharpened. It is just sharpening. That's all what it has happened. Now remember, this sharpening is exactly similar to that in Photoshop. You have high pass filter, which is similar to the sharpening what they are doing here. So sharpening and high pass filter are exactly same thing. Only difference is we are playing around with the different values. Now another problem what happens when you sharpen, the whole picture gets sharp. But our eyes are really picking up sharpening only at the edge. We don't want the whole picture to get sharpened. Now let me go to this rug. When I sharpen the picture, every pores of this rug gets sharpened so that it really is not really going to give you that aesthetic effect. So I want to restrict it only to edges of the picture, because edges are the ones where when it gets sharpened, our eyes pick it up. So that's where the masking slider comes. So to use a masking slider, press the Alt key, pull the masking slider. From left to right, you pull it out. So I'm starting from the right. The screen looks totally white. Okay. So as I start pulling, slowly black and white image of this particular picture comes out. It is showing basically the edges. Now you're going to eliminate all the edges which are not relevant and just going to keep the edge which is relevant. In my case, I'm looking at the eye there in the square box above the slider. I'm going to only keep when the eyelid, iris, and the lower eyelid is visible, and all the others I can leave it. So that is where I stop. I'm going to bring back to something sensible which I covered somewhere. I said 27. The radius is 1, and details is around 32, and masking is depending on. Basically, you hold the Alt key and then pull that mask from left to right. Now this is what you do. Now remember one thing: what happens whenever you sharpen, you're also increasing the noise. So sharpening and noise reduction go together. In fact, most of the time I start off with the noise reduction first, then I go for the sharpening, not the other way around. I don't go for the sharpening first and noise reduction. But if you go for the sharpening first and then go for the noise reduction, here the noise reduction, there are three sliders which are important: luminance slider, the detail slider exactly like this, and then the contrast slider. So noise reduction, I increase the noise reduction to a point where I start finding the details are really disappearing. So what I do is I keep on increasing the value up to a point, and then I slightly back it off. So I go to a point where the details are getting lost, then I back off. So that is where I use the noise reduction. Then I go to the detail slider, and most of the time I don't need to touch the detail or a contrast slider. If my noise reduction has destroyed details, only then I'll be going for the details or opting for the contrast. So again, play around with these two sliders. They are not that important as these radius and detail and masking sliders, but play around those two details basically to get the details back. So that's the whole idea of using sharpening and noise reduction slider. It is initially it looks daunting, but you start working with it, it will give you much better results than any of the plugins which are available in the market. Recently, we tested one plugin from Topaz, which is a sharpening and a noise reduction plugin. Compared to that, the Lightroom sharpening looks better. So that's about the sharpening. I hope I have covered this sharpening and noise reduction. Now I'm going to go a little faster because there won't be any more demonstrations. These questions can be easily answered because they are more of question and answers. Any easier and effective way to manage processed images in a custom way? Unfortunately, there is no shortcut if you want good quality. So there is no easier way. You have to go through the basic panel. You have to go through the tone curve. You have to go through the sharpening and the noise reduction. Then if you want a localized setting, you have to go through the brushes. Now, is how safe to use presets downloaded from internet? I checked this particular information from Adobe. Adobe says most of the presets are basically text files, so they can't have any malware built into it. If a malware is there, it won't be imported into Lightroom. That's what they say. But if you are using these files from a malware site, please be careful because you may be getting more than what you have asked for. I would suggest you create your own presets. Basically, presets are nothing but they are settings which were created and then saved as a preset. That's all. You can create your own presets. I just showed you how to create a preset in split tone. That's how you do it. Next question is, standard post-processing workflow in Lightroom CC is confusing. Some say cropping is first, some say cropping is last, some say do a basic setting first, some say do a noise reduction first, and so on. Now, I'll tell you, there is no hard and fast rule as far as Lightroom is concerned. Because what Lightroom does is it keeps all these settings in a file and it shows you as and when you change the sliders. So the workflow as far as Lightroom is concerned, I'm not talking about the Photoshop, but Lightroom is concerned, there is no hard and fast rule of what you should do and what you should not do. The only thing I suggest you to do first is lens correction. In fact, that is way down in the panels. So if you have a distortion in your picture, you start off with that lens correction option where you correct the distortion. And if you have a profile in the picture, for example, you know what camera which was used. For example, this is a Canon camera and it's 24-70 lens. You can use that particular information and then adjust the curvature which is distorted, or there is the barrel distortion, any one of those distortions which are corrected. Do that first before you go to any of the corrections. Because what happens is, if you start using a brush, start using tone curves, not tone curves, so it's basically a localized brush and other things, and then you jump to a lens correction as a last one, as that is lower down in the module. What really happens is, wherever you have applied brush, it may go mismatch on once the lens correction gets applied. So I suggest people to do the lens correction if there is any first, And then you can do any one of these, whether it's a crop in the beginning or crop at the end, it doesn't matter at all. I'll show you how to use a tone curve now. I think that finishes off all the develop module questions. So now let me go back to tone curve. Now tone curve is advanced subject as such, because even in my basic workshop, I usually don't talk about tone curve, because most of what can be done through the tone curve can be done through these basic settings. So remember, in Photoshop, there is levels and curves. So some people like levels, some people like curves. So similarly, in Lightroom, there is levels. These are the levels, basically. And then you have a curve. In fact, Lightroom hides two curves. Your curve may not be looking exactly like this curve. It may be looking like this curve. So these are the two different curves. By default, this is the curve what is there. So now this is the curve where you can change the highlights. Now let me do one. I can change the highlight. You have heard of S-curve applied. So that's what I'm basically going to do. I'm going to increase the highlights. I'm going to change the shadows. I'm going to change the darks. So the curve is called S-curve because it's like this. So that basically gives you sort of a oomph in the picture. So that's why people go for S-curve. And by default, there are three S-curves which already Lightroom gives you. One is called a linear curve, which is straight curve, which it started with. Then you have a medium contrast curve. Then you have a strong contrast curve. Now, if you go under point curve, that's you click on one more small diagram next to the curve at the bottom, then you get a straight curve, but nothing underneath. So this is where you pick up the point. So let's say that his hair is dark. So I want to pick up a point here. So that's a point in the curve. And if I am not careful, what happens is the picture will become like this. So that's why Lightroom doesn't show you this particular curve right at the beginning. So I can adjust this particular curve by going back and telling that it should be a linear curve. So that's a curve. Now what I can do is, let's say that I want to just brighten up this area. So I take a pointer, put it on that particular point. See that the trick. This is so that's the point. So I'll put one more point at the beginning, one more point at the bottom. I can manipulate the curve exactly I want, just to get what I want. I can also raise this X point up. I can bring another point down. So I can make the overall picture go darker and brighter. So this is a point curve as well as linear curve. Now, this is a larger topic. So probably in next one of the sessions, I'll take a full account of this, how to do tone curve, how to get the results, what you want, where exactly you're going to use it. I'll cover it up in the next subsequent webinars. So now let's go back to a few of the questions. Database. Now your database of Lightroom is called a catalog. So one of the question was, I would like to know about migrating one version of Lightroom to another version of Lightroom. See, usually what happens is there are point updates of a Lightroom. The point updates of the Lightroom is something like this. Say, let's say that recently the Lightroom updated to version 9. So version 9 came, then version 9.1 came, 9.2 came, 9.3 came. your Lightroom versions don't really change. But next, it comes with version 10. Now, when the version 10 comes, they add few more features, and they are not compared with your catalog, which was created in version 9. So what exactly you should do is allow the Lightroom to update to a catalog, to a newer catalog. It will update to a newer catalog, and there is a caution in that. So before updating, one thing I will ask everybody to do is back up your catalog. In fact, backing up the catalog is the next question. I'll cover up how to do a backup in that particular version. But here, migrating to one version to another version, always back up your catalog. It is just one single catalog file, LRCat file. So that catalog file, you have to save it somewhere else, not in your same hard disk, not next to that. Keep it somewhere else, either in a pen drive or in a cloud storage, anywhere else. So make sure that you back up, because all your information, whatever you're editing, what you have done, is saved in that catalog. So if that catalog is lost, nothing will happen to your original files, but all your work, what you have done, is lost. So keeping that catalog is very, very important. So before migrating to a new catalog, make sure that you back up your old catalog, then allow the Lightroom to migrate it to a new catalog. It will keep all what your work, what you have done earlier, intact, and then migrate and rename the catalog to a new catalog. And that's how you're going to save the catalog. So another, how can we deal with the working with the catalog on multiple laptops? How do you keep them in sync? Now, let me go back to Lightroom and show you where the catalog is. So you can create a new catalog, you can open a catalog. So these stuff are basically the catalogs. So the catalog, in this case, in my case, it's in the picture folder, which is, in my case, it's in the D drive. There's a picture folder. Within that, there is a Lightroom. And you see this particular file, LRCat file. That's a file which is a catalog. All these are preview data. These are not important. And there is also a file called LRCat lock. So that lock file, 1 minute. Am I showing you the lock file? No, sorry. Let me share you that particular file. So this is my LRCat file. So that file is required. The lock file says that that catalog is now open in a Lightroom. So when it's open, you can't manipulate it. So you have to close the Lightroom, then you have to back it up. So this is the most important part of your backing up strategy. So keep your LRCat file at every time in some other place. Now remember, Lightroom every week or so keeps on asking you whether you want to back up. So say you should back up, but unfortunately what it does is it creates a folder here and backs it up. So your LRCat file as well as your backup file are both are together. So they don't really work. Now, if you want to have LRCat file in multiple laptops, what you can do is you have an external hard disk, preferably SSD, external SSD. SSDs are faster than your pen drives. So have your catalog there, have your original file there, have your preview data there, everything there. So you plug in your SSD drive to one laptop, work with it. Make sure that you safely unplug the SSD, go to another laptop, unplug it there, and start using that. So this is the strategy where you want to use the same catalog, same set of files in various other laptops. Now, one of the questions which was asked is this. So this is already covered. If I'm post-processing a raw file from an external hard disk on a PC or a laptop, how to manage catalog so that if I open the raw file in a different LR, the changes made on the raw remains. Okay. Now remember, the changes what you made with the raw file is in the catalog. It is not with the original file. So far you keep the same catalog file, it will start opening that same uh, original file and a reference, and then it will take it up. Now, let's say that you have backed it up to a different drive. Now, this was one of the other questions which Dheeraj asked. So all my raw files are saved into my external hard disk. Let's say that hard drive A. Now they are imported into the Lightroom. I also back up all my raw files to another hard drive, which is B. Now that is not really a good strategy. I'll tell you why. The problem is I cannot edit those pictures if I am using a backup hard drive. Now the backup you should do is it should mirror exactly the external hard drive A. So you have files here in the hard drive A. The hard drive B should not be just a raw files. It should be exactly mirroring this particular raw drive. Because the Lightroom, when you import it, it will sort it out either in the form of a year, month, a day, or shoot wise. It will format it in a certain way and save them into a hard disk. So the hard drive A and B should be exact clones of each other. Now the second problem comes. Let's say that hard drive A is damaged and dead. So now you have saved it to the hard drive B. In fact, I'm planning to do another webinar on how to back up everything properly. In backup strategy in a newer world where we are going to save everything to online or in the hard disk and multiple hard disks, multiple drives, it's going to be a messy affair, and most of us don't back up. We need what is called a 3-to-1 backup. There should be 3 backups, 2 in a different media, 1 offsite. So these are the 3-to-1 backup, and I'll explain about that probably in a next seminar. I'll do how to back up. The backup strategy is probably one of the best strategy if you really implement it well. Now, coming here, I advise you to make sure that external hard disk A and external hard disk B are clones of each other. So if A is dead, you have to give B as a newer hard disk. Now, what really happens is when you open up the Lightroom will be searching for external hard disk A, but it doesn't find. Now, let me show you how it really happens here. Let me go to this particular file. Now, I have these files on my desktop. So, what I'm doing is I'll go to my desktop. That's all my files there. Now, let's say all my JPG files, I'll delete. I won't delete them. I'll rename them because Lightroom will not know. Now, this is exactly the same thing what will happen when you go into the Lightroom and plug in a different drive. Now, you see all these files, they are all showing that original file doesn't exist. So if I click, I'll be able to see it. That is because it's a preview. But if I try to go to a develop module and try to develop it, it will say the file could not be found and I won't be able to develop it at all. So that's why, so all the sliders will be gray. So this is exactly what happens when you connect a B drive instead of A drive. So what you should do is go back to library, go to that area where this particular files are missing. So when you right click it, it will tell you find missing folder. So go and in the find missing folder, you go back to the desktop, go to wherever I have kept this. So show this, I just changed JPEG to JPEG old. And now the file is there. So I can go to a develop module and I can edit it. So in your case, what you have to do is you have to show that drive A is missing. Now drive B is the one which is the drive A. So Lightroom automatically adjusts it and gives you an option to edit it. Dheeraj, I hope you have understood that. If you have a doubt, please ask me in the chat. So I think we have come to nearly closing of this particular question and answer. Let me okay. The last part of this last question is kindly cover backup of catalogs and best practices for catalog maintenance. With that, I'll conclude the main questions, and then if you have any chat, I'll cover it up. So, what you should do for Lightroom management of catalogs? Because in Lightroom, the catalogs are the most important one. So, make sure where your catalog is saved. You can easily go and find out your catalog by go into edit under preferences. If you see where your files are have catalog settings. I forgot exactly where the catalog settings are. Yeah, it's under performance. It's changed from earlier it was in the general, now it's come to performance. So go to catalog settings. So that's a catalog setting. Or there is also another option here directly under edit, under preferences. Below that is a catalog setting. Shortcut is Control Alt and comma. So when you go there, it will tell you exactly where the catalog setting is. So you can show the catalog. This is where the catalog is. So this is the catalog. And in this catalog, this is the LRCat file is the main catalog. So make sure that every day you back up this catalog. There are several strategies. You can back it up online. Since you have a lot of cloud storage, for example, you have a Google Drive, you have OneDrive, you have a Dropbox, you can have any of the syncing settings so that every day on a particular time, you make sure that it will sync with online, and make sure that you have a copy of your catalog somewhere saved every day. One of the problem of syncing while you're running is that's why don't give it automated. So probably you may be opening that particular catalog and using that catalog at that time. Whatever catalog which is saved may not be the actually good catalog. It may be still halfway through writing. So close Lightroom and then manually sync catalog on your cloud storage. Remember, catalogs are not very big. For example, I have about a few lakh files on my main hard disk, which are on one single catalog, and the catalog size is only about 200 to 300 MB. So catalogs are not really big, so you can easily manage them and you can save them. You don't have to manage anything else. The catalogs and original files. Your original RAW or JPEG files are the most important. So if you can manage those things, they are fantastic. I'll cover how to do all the other backups in probably next webinar, where it will be exclusively how to do backups for both your photographic assets, Photoshop, as well as what you can do with the Lightroom backing up. So I think I'll just go through the chat and go through a few of the questions which are asked so that I'll clarify. So let me start with the first question somewhere. Okay, Sudhindra has asked, what is the use of a gray card? Okay, gray card can be used to pick up your white balance. So if you use a gray card in a situation where it's basically where if your light hasn't changed, the gray card will be useful. So gray card is useful. Copy and add are similar or not? Okay. Copy and add are different. So when you are copying a file, you are copying a file from point A to point B. So they are moving from one side to another side. For example, you shot a picture and then it is coming from your card to a hard disk. That is a copy. Suppose you have a lot of files in the hard disk and you don't want to move them from one point to another point, then you choose add. So in this case, when I imported a file, I chose add because already I had files in my hard disk. I just wanted to add information into Lightroom. So add is adding information into the Lightroom. Copy is adding information into the Lightroom along with copying from point A to point B. And please don't use move, which is the third option there. So only copy or add. When you are using a pen drive, it doesn't allow you to choose add. It will only ask you to do a copy. So when you are using any removable drive, it is only copy. If I don't need to create layers, can I stick to only LR for editing? Yes, definitely. In fact, I don't use Photoshop nowadays for anything other than creating layers. I just stick with LR for most of my editing. All my photographs, what you see for last 3 years, are totally done with Lightroom, except very few of them where I have just gone to a Photoshop. Okay, teeth whitening, it's using a brush. You go to the teeth whitening, this thing. There is a preset already inside the brush called whitening of the teeth. So just choose that and just brush over the teeth. So anybody who has a yellow teeth will become bright white teeth, sparkling white. How to go back to previous edit step? Okay, in Lightroom, every edit what you do, forever it is stored under the history. So you can go to the history panel. Let me show you the history panel just because that's one of the life-saving panels. So let me go back to, let's say that I have done a lot of editing here. For this, if I go under the develop module, below the preset on the left-hand side, you have a history panel.
Doc, the refresh rate of the desktop is slow, so you will have to go a little slow because sometimes it just jumps the step.
Okay. But sound-wise, it's fine?
Right? Sound is fine, but the desktop refresh is slow.
Refresh is slow, okay. So now this is the preset. So when I close the preset, you see the history panel. This records every history what has done. I imported today at 7:24 p.m. From there, all what I had done, it records, and you can jump back to this. Now this will remain always, even if you close. Remember, in Lightroom, there is no save button. If you go under the file, there is no save button. Every step what you have done, it's already saved. So you can go back in many of the steps. Now remember, when you go back into the step and then you do a newer step, these older steps will go. For example, if I jump here to sharpening, and then after that, if I do something, change in the white balance, now that step is gone. So remember, when you go back and try to do something, and if you already want to do whatever steps you have done, create a snapshot. So right click, then create a snapshot. So that snapshot will be saved. So you can go back and again and again. So that's the advantage. So history panel is fantastic. You can visit this particular picture even after 10 years. If your catalog is same, that catalog will contain a history, which is not there in the Photoshop. So Photoshop, what happens is as you stop the Photoshop and save the picture, your history is lost. And even in the Photoshop, history is only up to say 50 steps or more. That's all. And after that, it's gone. Yeah, Dheeraj, I think I have answered your question. Editing, there were two schools of thoughts. One doesn't believe in too much of editing, and the other says that as long as it improves the picture, edits. Okay, I'm in the second. For me, editing is not a taboo. What happens is your camera itself edits. So when you save something as a JPEG, it is already done the editing. Whatever the picture setting, what you have kept, whatever the white balance, what you have kept is already stored. that means the editing has already taken place in your camera itself. So nothing is pure. When you say I've converted color to black and white, you've already done that. So that then you've already done the editing. So editing is not a taboo. Forget about the pure school guys. Uh, they are trying to tell you something which doesn't exist. So, but there is one more aspect. So when I say editing, it is not manipulating a picture. It's not like what you see my video. I'm really sitting in the room, not in that beach. So that is a manipulation. So if you try to manipulate your background, manipulate your elements in the picture, that is bad. So I'm not in Goa. I'm sitting here in my small town, Mudubidri, and then I'm trying to tell you that I'm in Goa. That is not what it is. I think I hope I have answered your question. If there is any other question, just give me a chat. I think we have already reached 9 o'clock. It's 2 hours. It was a long session. I hope you all enjoyed it. I will post this recording. So in case you have missed any of this thing or joined me late, you can always go backwards about indexing. Lightroom has a catalog, and along with that, when you go into grid view, let me share this. I think privately I'll talk about in detail about indexing. So you can sort out your set of pictures depending on various criteria. So let me share this particular picture. Let me go back to the grid view. Now, at the top of the grid view, you get text, attribute, metadata, and none. Text is if you added something to the picture. For example, if you added a keyword, then it's a text. If you added some attributes, for example, you put a star rating, you put a color rating, which you can use to sort out your photographs. So those things are called attributes. Metadata is what is inside the photograph. For example, if I want to choose all the photographs which are shot in 2015, so these are the photos which are shot in 2015, and they were shot all of them with one camera, and this one is unknown camera. That is probably because this is from our photo critic forum in our Facebook. So Facebook, what it does is it strips away all the metadata. That's why it says unknown camera. There are no such secret cameras available in the market yet. This is FZ1000, which is a Panasonic camera. So there I shot all these pictures. This is in Singapore. Now, then if I had labeled it red, for example, this I have labeled it red. So that is mentioned here. So you can index it in a different way using this metadata. You can also go back into the metadata and choose something, where I want all my photos were taken all of these. Among that, something which is shot in 50 mm. So these are all the photos which were shot in 50 mm. I can also go for f-stops, where I can say that, I want f-stop which is only taken at f2.8. See, all the photographs which I have taken at f2.8. Now, this is very useful. Suppose you want to sell your lens. You can see that, 200 mm f4 lens, there is only one picture in that, 70-200 f4 lens. So I realized that I've clicked more picture with the 2.8 than f4. So I sold that f4 lens, then went for 2.8 lens. So that is how you judge yourself, all your options, and then you can select and choose whatever photographs you want. Now, once you have chosen the photograph, you can rename them, you can convert them into collections, you can save them into different folders, and so on. That is where the indexing really comes in. So that's a brief preview of indexing. Probably in one of the basic workshops online, I'm going to cover how to do indexing, how to search for particular criteria in Lightroom. And this is the most useful part of Lightroom, which a lot of people ignore it. They only jump into the develop module. Develop module, I have covered most of it today. So I think we'll stop here, and we can do that in a separate session.